February 26, 1945 began without ceremony. Dawn did not announce itself with color or warmth over the black volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima. It arrived as a dull gray pressure, a thinning of darkness that revealed a shoreline already scarred beyond recognition. The sand was not sand at all but crushed volcanic stone, soft underfoot yet heavy, sucking at boots with every step as if the island itself resisted being taken. Private Wilson Watson stood in the well of a pitching landing craft, fingers locked around the worn wooden fore-end of a Browning automatic rifle that weighed nearly as much as some of the men beside him. 20 pounds of steel and wood hung from his arms before ammunition was even counted, and every Marine in the boat knew the reputation of the weapon he carried. Too heavy, too slow, too awkward for the kind of war they were fighting now. Doctrine said automatic weapons belonged on tripods and sandbags, not in the hands of infantry expected to advance under fire. The Japanese had built their defenses around that assumption. Watson did not know it yet, but the next hours would tear that assumption apart. When the ramp slammed down and the surf rushed in, there was no enemy fire. No screaming artillery. No machine guns stitching the water. Just silence, broken only by engines and shouted commands as Marines poured onto the sulfur-stained shore. Watson stepped forward, boots sinking deep, the weight of the bar dragging his shoulders down as he moved inland with his squad. Naval bombardment had churned the island into a wasteland of craters and shattered rock, but the quiet felt wrong. It was the kind of quiet that meant someone was waiting. Japanese doctrine had changed since the early days of the war. Gone were the suicidal beach charges. In their place was patience. General Kurabayashi had ordered his men to let the Americans land, to let them stack themselves shoulder to shoulder on a narrow strip of death before revealing the true battlefield. 47 minutes after Watson's boots left the surf, the island came alive. Mortar rounds fell first, plunging down among the clustered Marines with no warning. The black sand erupted in fountains of stone and flesh. Men dropped where they stood, some killed instantly, others screaming as shrapnel tore through legs and backs. Then the hills began to flash. Not one or two positions, but dozens, firing in disciplined bursts from caves, bunkers, and slits invisible from the beach. Machine gun fire swept the open ground, crossing from angles the Marines had not even considered. Every depression, every crater that looked like cover had been measured, registered, and mapped months earlier by Japanese gunners who knew exactly where to drop their fire. Watson's platoon pushed forward anyway, because that was the only choice. Staying on the beach meant dying under indirect fire. Moving inland meant gambling against positions no one could see. Sergeant McMahon shouted orders that barely carried over the noise as the squad scrambled toward a shallow fold in the terrain. Watson followed, the bar catching on jagged rock, its bipod slamming uselessly against the ground. Marines with Garans moved faster, lighter, diving into whatever cover they could find. Watson arrived last, chest heaving, arms burning, the weight of the weapon suddenly feeling less like a burden and more like an anchor tied to his spine. The first machine gun position revealed itself less than 60 yards away, firing from a cave mouth that had survived days of bombardment untouched. Watson did what he had been trained to do. He dropped prone, kicked out the bipod, and fired controlled shots toward the muzzle flashes. The bar was accurate, powerful. But within seconds, mortar rounds began walking toward his position. Dirt and stone hammered around him, forcing him to abandon the firing point he had just established. The lesson was immediate and brutal. Static fire drew death. The battlefield did not reward patience. It punished it. Nearby, a rifleman emptied clip after clip toward the same cave, accomplishing nothing but revealing his position. Japanese defenders appeared only long enough to fire, then vanished back into tunnels that connected the entire hillside like veins beneath the skin. Watson understood then that this was not the war he had trained for. Targets would not stand still. They would not trade shots at range. They would appear, kill, and disappear again unless someone closed the distance fast enough to stop them. When the machine gun fired again, Watson stood up. He did not think of doctrine or manuals or weight tables. He moved because staying still meant dying. He advanced directly toward the cave, firing the bar in short, violent bursts as he went. The weapon bucked against his shoulder, heavy but stable, the recoil settling naturally into its mass. The automatic fire pinned the defenders in place, denying them the seconds they needed to withdraw. Watson covered 40 yards in less than half a minute, boots slipping on loose stone, breath tearing from his chest as he closed the gap that doctrine said should never be crossed under fire. At 20 yards, he fired an entire magazine into the cave mouth in one sustained burst. The gun roared until the bolt locked back, the cave falling silent in its wake. Marines behind him stared in disbelief. One man with a weapon everyone hated had just erased a position that had stalled an entire platoon. But the cost was immediate. 20 rounds gone in seconds. One engagement had consumed a tenth of his ammunition. Watson reloaded, hands moving faster now, not because training demanded it, but because survival did. The platoon advanced again, this time differently. Men stopped trying to find long fields of fire. They moved closer, using folds in the terrain, pushing forward in short rushes while Watson's automatic fire smashed anything that revealed itself. By the time they reached the base of Hill 203, Watson had 10 magazines left. Then the mortar round landed. It exploded behind him, killing Corporal Henderson instantly and shredding the communications wire that linked the platoon to the rest of the battalion. The blast scattered the squad across the hillside, leaving men isolated, pinned, or wounded in places where no one could reach them. When the shelling stopped, Watson found himself alone near the crest, the bar resting across his knees as he listened to Japanese voices echoing from below. Enemy soldiers were moving again, reoccupying positions that should have been cleared. The hill was being sealed off, cut away from the rest of the American line. 7 enemy positions revealed themselves as Watson watched, connected by tunnels that allowed defenders to flow like water from one place to another. A Japanese squad emerged confidently from a tunnel entrance downslope, rifles held low, certain they were facing broken remnants. Watson waited until they were fully exposed, then fired. The burst cut them down in seconds. 8 men fell before any could react, their bodies tumbling across ground that had felt safe moments earlier. But Watson knew what that meant. The Japanese would not send one squad. They would send many. An entire company if needed. Numbers they could afford. He reloaded and shifted position immediately, moving before return fire could find him. The next assault came from the north. This time they were cautious, bounding forward, using cover. Watson met them the same way. Moving while firing. Never staying in one place long enough to be bracketed. The bar's weight steadied his aim as he advanced, its automatic fire forcing the enemy to ground, breaking their coordination, killing leaders before they could direct movement. For magazines were gone in 10 minutes. 80 rounds burned away, but the hilltop was changing. Japanese positions fell silent one by one, either abandoned or destroyed. Watson realized something critical in that chaos. The caves were not strong points at close range. They were traps. Ricocheting rounds and fragments turned entrances into kill zones when fire was pushed inside relentlessly. At 12:05, Watson assaulted the central bunker. He crossed 60 yards of open ground under observation, firing continuously, the bar roaring as he moved. The defenders inside had prepared for grenades and rifle fire. They were not prepared for sustained automatic fire delivered at point-blank range. The bunker fell in less than half a minute. 12 men died inside without ever mounting a coordinated defense. Then the sniper found him. The bullet struck his left shoulder, spinning him into the rocks. Pain exploded through his body, white and consuming, but he was alive. The round had passed through muscle, missing bone and arteries. Blood soaked his jacket as he tested his arm. It still moved. The bar still worked. Japanese voices rose again, confident now. A wounded man was easier to deal with. Watson had 3 magazines left. When they advanced, he did not retreat. He moved toward them. Pain forced discipline. Every burst was measured. Every movement deliberate. His wound slowed him, but it also stripped away waste. When a grenade fragment tore into his leg, he used the blood trail to mislead the enemy, firing from one position and moving instantly to another. They chased ghosts while he controlled the fight. The final assault came all at once. 37 enemy soldiers converged from multiple directions. Watson fired until the bolt locked back on his last magazine. 20 rounds. 90 seconds. He moved constantly, firing controlled bursts, never stopping, never letting them coordinate. When the last round was gone at 12:44, the hilltop fell silent. Hours later, Marines found 60 enemy dead in a space barely 100 yards wide. Watson was evacuated alive. His shoulder shattered. His leg torn. The bar lay beside him, still warm, still flawless. It had fired hundreds of rounds without failure. The weapon everyone said was obsolete had rewritten the rules of the fight. Watson would never return to combat. But the lesson traveled without him. Automatic weapons, used aggressively, moving forward under fire, changed how Marines fought for the rest of the war. The too-heavy gun disappeared soon after, retired just as its true purpose had been revealed. On a hill of black stone in the Pacific, one Marine learned what doctrine could not teach, and survived long enough to prove it.